The late 1960s were a time of great change in America. It was a time of hope, music, and new ideas. In Northern California, the spirit of the Summer of Love still lingered in the air. People felt a sense of freedom. They felt safe in their communities. But, a shadow was beginning to fall over the San Francisco Bay Area. It was a shadow that would bring a new kind of fear. This fear was not about war or politics. It was a personal, terrifying fear. A faceless killer was about to begin a reign of terror. He would call himself the Zodiac. He would change the lives of so many people forever. This story is about that shadow and the darkness it brought with it. This killer was different from others. He didn't just commit crimes in the dark and then disappear. He wanted everyone to know about his work. He craved attention and fame. He would reach out to the newspapers. He would contact the police directly. He used the media to create a terrifying public persona. He played a twisted game with the very people who were trying to catch him. He sent letters and strange, coded messages. He made threats against school children. He made the entire region feel like they were his potential victims. The sense of safety that people once felt began to crumble away, piece by piece, under the weight of his taunts. I remember this time very clearly. I was working as a political cartoonist at the San Francisco Chronicle. The newsroom was always buzzing with stories, but when the first letter from the Zodiac arrived, the atmosphere changed. It was something new, something chilling. It felt like the killer was speaking directly to us, using our newspaper as his stage. We were no longer just reporting the news, we were part of it. The killer wanted us to publish his strange symbols and his arrogant words. He wanted to use our pages to spread fear, and we had to decide how to handle this unprecedented situation. The mystery began to consume me, right from that very first letter. The story of the Zodiac is more than just a series of unsolved crimes. It is a story about a time and a place. It's about how a single, unknown person can hold an entire population in a grip of fear. It shows how the media can be used by a criminal to build a myth around himself. The mystery has lasted for decades, long after the killing stopped. The questions have haunted investigators, journalists, and the families of the victims. Who was this man? Why did he do these terrible things? And how did he manage to simply vanish, leaving behind only a name, a symbol, and a legacy of terror that refuses to fade away? The story begins on a quiet, dark road. On December 20th, 1968, two high school students, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, were on their first date. They parked their car on Lake Herman Road, a lonely spot known as a lover's lane near Benicia. It was supposed to be a happy, innocent evening for the young couple, but their night ended in tragedy. An unknown attacker approached their car and shot them both. They had no connection to organized crime. They were not involved in anything dangerous. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The police were baffled. There was no clear motive for such a brutal and senseless act. It was a shocking crime that left the small community in disbelief. For several months, the case went cold. People in the area were nervous, but life slowly returned to normal. Then, on the night of July 4th, 1969, the killer struck again. This time, it was at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, another secluded spot just a few miles from the first crime scene. Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau were sitting in their parked car when another vehicle pulled up behind them. A man with a flashlight approached their car and opened fire. Darlene was killed. Michael was shot multiple times, but, miraculously survived the attack. He was able to give the police the first description of the attacker. A short, heavy-set man. The nightmare had begun all over again. The killer was not finished for the night. Less than an hour after the shooting at Blue Rock Springs, the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call. The voice on the other end was calm and monotone. He spoke in a strange, rehearsed way. The man claimed responsibility for the attack on Darlene and Michael. He also confessed to the murders of David and Betty Lou from the previous December. He was connecting the crimes himself. He was telling the police that these were not random, isolated incidents. They were the work of one person. The caller was taking ownership of the terror he had created, and it was clear he wanted the world to know it. This phone call was a turning point. Before this, the police had two separate mysterious murder cases. Now, they knew they were hunting for a single serial killer. The man on the phone had given them a chilling message. He had laid down a challenge. The fact that he called them so soon after the crime showed his arrogance and his need for recognition. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was stepping into the light, but on his own terms. The Bay Area was now facing a new reality. A predator was moving through their quiet towns, choosing victims at random, and he was not afraid to announce his crimes to the world. A new chapter of fear was just beginning. Just a few weeks after the attack at Blue Rock Springs, the killer made his next move. This time, he didn't use a telephone, he used the mail. On August 1, 1969, 3 nearly identical letters arrived at the offices of 3 different newspapers: the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. Each letter began with the same chilling phrase, "This is the murderer." He provided details about the 2 crime scenes that only the killer could have known. He was proving that he was the real person behind the attacks. He wanted to remove any doubt. He was establishing his credibility in the most terrifying way possible. The letters contained a demand. The killer insisted that the newspapers publish a strange coded message on their front pages. This was his cipher. He claimed that his identity was hidden within the complex grid of symbols. If they refused to publish his code, he threatened to go on a kill rampage and murder a dozen people over the weekend. The editors of the newspapers were faced with an impossible choice. Should they give in to the demands of a terrorist, or should they refuse and risk the lives of innocent people? It was a frightening ethical dilemma. They had to take the threat seriously. The puzzle was a game, but the stakes were life and death. The newspapers decided to publish the cipher. They felt they had no other choice. Along with the coded message, they printed articles about the killer and his threats. This is when the public truly became aware of the monster in their midst. The killer had successfully used the media to amplify his message of terror. He was no longer just a local story in Vallejo. He was now a Bay Area phenomenon. His strange symbols were printed for everyone to see. People tried to solve the puzzle. They hoped it would reveal the killer's name and bring an end to the fear. The entire region was now participating in the killer's disturbing game. A few days later, another letter arrived. It began with a new, even more iconic greeting. "This is the Zodiac speaking." He had given himself a name. He was creating a brand for his particular brand of evil. In this letter, he seemed to mock the police for not catching him. He shared more disturbing details about his thoughts and motivations. He was building a personality for himself, that of a brilliant, unstoppable killer who was always one step ahead of the law. The name Zodiac, along with his cross-circle symbol, would become infamous. It would be printed on countless front pages and burned into the public's memory for generations to come. As summer turned to fall in 1969, the Zodiac's reign of terror expanded into new territory. On September 27th, he chose a beautiful, sunny afternoon for his next attack. He traveled north to Lake Berryessa in Napa County. College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were relaxing by the water's edge. They were enjoying a peaceful day together. Suddenly, a man appeared. He was wearing a strange, executioner-style hood with the Zodiac symbol stitched on the front. He was holding a gun. The costume was theatrical and bizarre. It was designed to create maximum fear. He told the couple he was an escaped convict who needed their car and money to flee to Mexico. The situation quickly became even more terrifying. The man in the hood ordered Cecilia to tie up Brian with pieces of rope he provided. Then, he tied her up. Instead of taking their car and leaving, he pulled out a long knife. He brutally stabbed both of them, over and over again. After the attack, he walked calmly back to Brian's car. He used a black marker to draw his cross-circle symbol on the car door. He also wrote the dates of his previous attacks and the current date. September 27th, 69, 6:30, by knife. He then called the Napa Police Department from a payphone to report his double murder. Brian Hartnell survived his injuries, but Cecilia Shepard died 2 days later. Just 2 weeks later, the Zodiac brought his terror directly into the heart of San Francisco. On the night of October 11, 1969, a cab driver named Paul Stein picked up a passenger. The passenger asked to be taken to the upscale neighborhood of Presidio Heights. When they arrived at the corner of Washington and Cherry Streets, the passenger shot Paul Stein in the head, killing him instantly. The killer then took Stein's wallet and car keys. He also tore a piece from the back of Stein's shirt. This small piece of bloody fabric would become his next trophy. He wanted proof of his crime. It was a bold and shocking murder in a busy city, very different from his previous attacks in remote areas. This crime was almost the Zodiac's undoing. 3 teenagers in a house across the street saw the attack and called the police. The initial police radio dispatch mistakenly described the suspect as a black man. When two officers arrived on the scene, they saw a heavy-set white man walking away from the area. Because he didn't match the description, they let him go without questioning him. It was a terrible mistake. Later, a corrected description was sent out, but it was too late. The Zodiac had slipped through their fingers. He had walked away from the scene of a murder, right past the police, and disappeared into the San Francisco night. He would later mock them for this error in one of his letters. The Zodiac killer was not just a murderer, he was a master of psychological warfare. His letters to the newspapers and the police were his primary weapons in this war. These letters were filled with a strange mix of arrogance, grammatical errors, and chilling threats. He demanded that his letters be published on the front page. He threatened to commit more murders if his demands were not met. He even threatened to attack a school bus full of children. This threat, in particular, caused widespread panic. Police officers started following school buses. Parents were terrified to let their children walk to school. The Zodiac was proving that he could terrorize people without even committing a crime. The most fascinating part of his communication was his use of ciphers. He sent a total of 4 coded messages. The first one, the 408-symbol cipher, was sent in 3 parts to the 3 newspapers in 1969. He claimed it contained his identity. It was solved within a week by a schoolteacher and his wife, Donald and Betty Harden. But the solution was not a name. It was a rambling, misspelled message about how much he enjoyed killing people. He said he was collecting slaves for the afterlife. It was a glimpse into a deeply disturbed mind. It was disappointing for everyone who hoped it would lead to his capture. The puzzle was just another one of his cruel games. The most famous of his puzzles is the 340-character cipher, which he sent in a letter in November 1969. For more than 51 years, this cipher remained unsolved. The best codebreakers from the FBI, the CIA, and amateur communities all tried to crack it. It became one of the great unsolved mysteries of cryptography. Its complexity made the Zodiac seem like a brilliant criminal genius. It added to his myth. People wondered what secrets it held. Was his name finally hidden in this one? Did it explain his motives? The unsolved cipher was a constant reminder of the killer's power. It was a challenge that taunted law enforcement for decades. Finally, in December 2020, a team of amateur codebreakers from around the world announced they had solved the Z340 cipher. The team, which included an American software developer, a Belgian computer programmer, and an Australian mathematician, had worked for years on the puzzle. The solution was another chilling message. It did not reveal his name. Instead, it was more of the same taunting. He wrote that he was not afraid of being executed, and that he hoped they were having fun trying to catch him. The solving of the cipher was a major breakthrough, but it was also another disappointment. It was one more dead end in the long and frustrating search for the Zodiac's true identity. The Zodiac's crimes and letters, they created a cloud of fear that just hung over Northern California for years. People's daily lives were changed by the constant threat. The randomness of his attacks was what made him so terrifying. His victims weren't connected to each other. They were students, a cab driver, a young mother, just ordinary people doing ordinary things. And well, that meant anyone could be next. The feeling of safety in one's own community was shattered. Folks started locking their doors more carefully, looking at strangers with suspicion. The freedom of the 1960s was replaced by this new and unfamiliar anxiety. The fear was especially strong among young people. 2 of the Zodiac's attacks took place at lovers' lanes, which used to be private, romantic spots for couples. The Zodiac turned them into places of terror. Teenagers and young adults had to think twice about where they went on dates, knowing a simple evening out could turn deadly. The killer's threat to attack a school bus also created a deep sense of panic among parents and children. The image of a faceless killer targeting innocent kids was, honestly, a nightmare for every family. The Zodiac knew exactly how to find the weak spots in society and exploit them to create the most fear possible. The media played a huge role in spreading this fear. Every new letter from the Zodiac was a front-page story. Every threat was broadcast on the evening news. The killer's strange symbol and his arrogant words were everywhere. While the newspapers were just reporting the news, they also became the Zodiac's platform. He used them to build his own terrifying legend. People would wait for the next letter, almost like an episode in a horror series. The mystery was compelling, but it also meant the entire Bay Area was living inside the Zodiac's twisted narrative. He was the author of their fear, and the newspapers were publishing his story. Even after the killings seemed to stop, the fear didn't go away. The Zodiac promised to keep killing, but there were no more confirmed Zodiac murders after 1969. He continued to send letters for several years, until the late 1970s. This created a different kind of anxiety. Was he still out there, watching and waiting? Had he moved to another state? Or was he living a quiet, normal life among the very people he had terrorized? The lack of answers was almost as scary as the attacks themselves. The mystery of the Zodiac was not just an unsolved case. It was a ghost that haunted the Bay Area, a constant reminder that a monster had walked among them and was never brought to justice. The hunt for the Zodiac killer was, honestly, one of the most extensive and frustrating police investigations in American history. Dozens of detectives from multiple police departments worked on the case. They were in Vallejo, Napa, San Francisco, and other jurisdictions, and this sometimes made it difficult to share information effectively. The killer seemed to enjoy this confusion. He sent letters to different newspapers and police departments, forcing them to try and piece together a puzzle that, really, he controlled. The investigators followed thousands of leads and interviewed hundreds of potential suspects, but every lead seemed to go cold. Every promising suspect was eventually cleared. The police had some evidence, but it was limited. They had fingerprints, but many were partial or unusable. They had shell casings from the shootings. They had the surviving victims' descriptions of the attacker, but the descriptions varied. Sometimes he was described as heavy, other times as more average. He wore glasses in one description but not in another. The hooded costume at Lake Berryessa completely hid his face. The piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt was a powerful taunt. But it didn't lead them to the killer. It felt like the Zodiac was a ghost, always leaving just enough evidence to prove he was there, but never enough to reveal who he was. Over the years, investigators tried everything they could think of. They consulted with handwriting experts to analyze the Zodiac's distinctive printing. They worked with psychologists to create a profile of the killer. They believed he was likely an intelligent, but socially awkward man who felt powerless in his normal life. They thought he might have some military or police training because of his knowledge of police procedures and codes. But a psychological profile is not a name or an address. It's just a theory. As the years turned into decades, the original investigators retired. New detectives took over the case, inheriting the boxes of old files and the heavy weight of an unsolved mystery. In the modern era, new technology has brought new hope to the case. Investigators have tried to use DNA to solve the mystery. They've attempted to extract DNA from the saliva on the envelopes and stamps of the Zodiac's letters. In the early 2000s, they developed a partial DNA profile. However, it has not yet led to a definitive match. It has been used to rule out some key suspects, which is also an important part of the investigation. The use of forensic genealogy, which has solved other famous cold cases, offers another potential path forward. The hunt for the Zodiac continues, even today. It's a testament to the dedication of law enforcement who refuse to let the case go cold. Over the more than 50 years since the Zodiac's reign of terror, countless theories and suspects have emerged. The case has become a magnet for amateur detectives and obsessed researchers. Everyone has their own favorite suspect or pet theory. I spent years of my own life honestly consumed by this puzzle, trying to connect the dots and find the man behind the hood. The most famous and widely discussed suspect was a man named Arthur Lee Allen. He was a former elementary school teacher who had been fired for misconduct. He was interviewed by police multiple times and was the subject of several search warrants. There was a lot of circumstantial evidence that pointed to Allen. A friend told police that Allen had talked about killing people and using the name Zodiac before the crimes even started. He owned the same type of gun and ammunition used in some of the attacks. He wore a Zodiac brand watch, which had the cross circle symbol on it. He lived in Vallejo and worked near one of the crime scenes. When police searched his trailer, they found weapons and strange materials. However, the evidence was never strong enough. His fingerprints did not match the prints found at the crime scenes. A DNA test performed years later on the partial profile did not match him. Allen died in 1992, taking any secrets he had to the grave. Many other men have been named as possible suspects over the years. Some people believe the Zodiac was a man named Richard Gaikowski, who was a newspaper editor in the 1960s. His supporters point to handwriting similarities and the fact that he was a skilled writer and editor. Others have focused on Lawrence Kane, a man who worked in the same building as Darlene Ferrin and had a history of strange behavior. There have been dozens of other names, each with their own set of clues and coincidences. But for every piece of evidence that seems to point to a suspect, there's another piece that seems to rule them out. The case is a maze of contradictions. The world of Zodiac theories is a deep and often confusing rabbit hole. There are theories that the Zodiac was a member of law enforcement, which is why he was never caught. There are theories that he was part of a strange cult. Some people even believe there was more than one killer working together. Every few years, a new book or documentary comes out, claiming to have finally solved the case, but none have ever provided the definitive proof needed to close the book on the Zodiac. The case remains officially unsolved, a collection of fascinating suspects and compelling theories, but no concrete answers. The truth remains just out of reach, lost in a fog of speculation and time. The story of the Zodiac killer is, well, more than just a true crime tale. It's a powerful example of how some mysteries can capture the public imagination and refuse to let go. Why does this case, above all others, continue to fascinate us? Part of the reason is the killer himself. He was not just a murderer, he was a performer. He created a character, the Zodiac, complete with a costume, a symbol, and a voice. He communicated with the public and the police, making everyone a part of his story. He left behind puzzles and clues, inviting the world to play his game. This theatrical element turned a series of tragic crimes into an enduring legend. For the families of the victims, the enduring mystery is a source of unending pain. The victims, David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard and Paul Stein, are sometimes forgotten in the excitement over the ciphers and suspects. They were real people with lives and futures that were stolen from them. Their families have had to live for decades without justice. They've had to watch as the killer who took their loved ones became a famous pop culture figure. For them, an unsolved case is not a fascinating puzzle. It's an open wound. The lack of closure means they can never truly move on. The question of who and why haunts them forever. An unsolved mystery like the Zodiac case also leaves a scar on society. It shows us that sometimes, there are no easy answers. It reminds us that evil can sometimes strike without reason, and then simply vanish without a trace. This is an uncomfortable truth. We want to believe that our systems of justice are powerful enough to solve any crime. We want to believe that every monster will eventually be caught. The Zodiac case challenges that belief. It shows the limits of investigation and the frustrating role that luck can play. The fact that he might have lived a long, free life after committing such terrible acts is a deeply disturbing thought for all of us. So, why do some mysteries endure? They endure because they leave a void. They create questions that we are desperate to answer. They tap into our deepest fears about randomness and the unknown. The Zodiac killer created the perfect mystery. It has all the elements of a great story, a terrifying villain, baffling clues, heroic investigators, and a shocking, unresolved ending. As long as his identity remains a secret, people will continue to search for answers. They'll continue to analyze the letters, debate the suspects, and try to solve the puzzles. The Zodiac wanted to create a legacy of terror, and in a way, he succeeded. His shadow still lingers, a permanent and chilling question mark in the history of American crime.